the sermon series that we're doing for Lent, I'm excited about because we are looking at some hard scriptures. Last week we talked about Jesus and the demon-possessed man. And this week, a dear friend of mine, Leslie Dotson, is the Associate Regional Minister. She's out of the Tulsa office. And when I say office, I mean her car. And she's preaching on Jesus and the hemorrhaging woman. And every time I spell this in my computer, it has to correct it because I can't spell anyway, but who can spell that word?
I can.
She can. Yeah, I know. I just can't. I have the bad spelling gene. The next week, I will be preaching on Jesus and the extravagant woman and the woman who breaks the perfume and anoints Jesus' feet. I'm really looking forward to the following week when Jeff will tackle Jesus and Judas. And that's a tackle. And next, Tom will be preaching on Jesus and Simon Peter. And finally, on Palm Sunday, I will be preaching on Jesus and Pilate. And the journey to the cross will almost be complete. I also want to say that the week of Holy Week, after I preach on Jesus and Pilate, that following Wednesday night, we're having an all-church dinner. It'll be an amazing event of a dinner, and I really encourage you to come and hear the story of Jesus coming from Pilate, being arrested in the garden, and through Pilate, and going to the cross and being placed in the grave. It'll be a powerful night of worship. But right now, I'm so excited to hear Leslie.
Thank you, John, I think, for inviting me this morning to offer the word. I will tell you that I am humbled to stand before you because you are the people of God. And I know you do the ministry that God has called you to do through every one of your unique gifts. Again, thank you, John. Hear these words from the author of Mark, beginning with verse 25. Chapter 5. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all she had, and she was no better. Rather, grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately, her hemorrhaging stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that the power had gone from him, Jesus turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said, "You see the crowd pressing in on you? How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Will you pray with me, please? O Holy One, we ask that you open our ears so we can hear your word. Open our minds to understand your words, and open our hearts to merge all the words we hear and understand into action for building up of your kingdom here on earth. We ask this in the name of the one we call Christ. Amen. Mary Connor wrote these words, "For making me a woman in what still so often seems a man's world, I thank you, because you taught me by example that power is your gift and not my possession. For giving me a body, though sometimes it fails me and is not all I wish it was, or rather, a good deal more than I wish it was, I thank you. Because you taught me that I am much more than my body, and yet my body is your holy temple. For calling me to be more than I believe I can be, and less than I sometimes pretend I am, I thank you. Because you taught me that being is more than doing, that who I am and whose I am is more important than what I do or what I have. For all that you are, Creator, Redeemer, the great I am, I bless you as you have so greatly blessed me. There were many afflictions in Jesus' time. Any type of skin disease like leprosy, psoriasis, or even teenage acne would make someone an outcast. Those afflictions that people could not understand also birthed many outcasts. Even a bleeding nose was concerning because that was impure. Jesus helped more than one outcast become an insider through healing and wholeness. All of this as he walked his journey to the cross. Jesus and his disciples crossed the Galilean Sea. He cast demons out of a man called Legion. The demons went into swine, and the swine ran into the sea and what? Drowned. As Jesus was walking, a man named Jairus stopped him and asked him to come and heal his 12-year-old daughter who was sick. So Jesus took 3 of his disciples and started the walk to the house of Jairus. Before, during, and after the time of Jesus, and even today, many women were and are shunned during their life-giving cycles. The shunning represents only one theological perspective. The life-giving cycle removes the sins of women. In other words, women are unclean, especially during that time. In some cultures, even today, women young and old are required to sleep, eat, and stay away from their families or tribes. They are unclean because of their life-giving cycles. Now we read about a woman who hemorrhaged for many years and truly was unclean. We know nothing of why she was hemorrhaging. There are only assumptions. Let's think about this healing story through her perspective. If I could just touch his clothes, I will be healed. That's what she told herself. This nameless hemorrhaging woman who'd traveled 30 miles, fueled by the strength of her faith. It was a daring plan because, according to Mosaic law, women who were unclean were not allowed to touch anyone, much less the Son of God. But desperate women do desperate things. I've known women who have stolen food so their babies could eat. I know women who endured years of abuse until that one moment when they could escape and protect their children and themselves. They were desperate women. For 12 long years, this unnamed strong woman hemorrhaged, making her physically sick and socially unacceptable. However, she was desperate and she was determined. The doctors of her time were unable to relieve her suffering. She spent all she had. Yet, instead of getting better, she grew worse. Many of us have been there, dealing with prolonged illnesses or stubborn medical conditions. We know it's frustrating, even embarrassing, to continue to go to the doctor, only to return home with expensive prescriptions and another doctor or hospital bill. Yet there is sometimes little hope and no relief. One of the true miracles of this story is what remained healthy and strong in all this time. Sisters and brothers, it was her faith. Her willingness to believe, her willingness to hope she could be well again, despite all the strong evidence to the contrary. She heard about a man who'd healed many with various diseases, and she made her way to Capernaum. Now, after walking 30 miles, I would have thrown myself in Jesus' path and begged for healing. Instead, this strong, faith-filled woman quietly came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. By law, her touch would make Jesus unclean. By grace, just the opposite happened. Immediately, her hemorrhaging stopped. Without a word, a look, or even a touch from Jesus, she was made whole. Simply by believing he could heal her and daring to act on that belief by touching just the hem of his garment. When her faith was rewarded, she wasn't the only one who noticed. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" Can you hear her heart beating? Can you sense her fear? For she had stolen a miracle. Then the disciples pointed out that many in the crowded street were touching him. Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Now, sisters and brothers, he was not looking to accuse. He was looking to affirm, since he felt the healing energy leave his body. The same faith that empowered her to stretch out her hand now gave her the strength to step forward. She fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. She risked everything, public humiliation, if not punishment, to make her confession of faith, explaining to the crowd, according to Luke, why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Whew, this is some story. This strong woman of faith went beyond all propriety to touch the hem of another person. This story shares with us the relationship between touch and healing. This important short story dramatically interrupts the miracle story of the healing and now the raising of the daughter of Jairus. This story goes beyond the touch and the words of Jesus to those healed and moves towards the person healed by reaching out to Jesus through touch. Glenna Mahoney writes these words, and I've adapted them. May we remember that we belong in your arms. It is there that we are healed, and there we are whole. May all impurities be cast from our minds, our hearts, and our bodies. May every fiber of our beings be filled with your light. May our cells vibrate with your divine energy. May our bodies and souls radiate your love. You are our divine physician. In you we trust. We accept your healing. We accept your love. We accept ourselves. Let us remember this powerful, faith-filled story as we journey with Jesus to the cross. Let it be so. Amen.